Welcome to the American Choral Directors Association. I'm Gene Brooks. Today we're in Los Angeles, California. We're presenting ACDA on Location, Volume 3 of ACDA on Location. Today we're visiting with the great American composer, conductor, Jester Hairston. Jester is known throughout the world for his knowledge of black American folk music. Jester Hairston was born July 9, 1901 in Blues Creek, North Carolina. He lived there as a child until the age of approximately 1.5 years old, when his family moved to Pennsylvania, where his father worked in the coal mines. Shortly thereafter, his father passed away with pneumonia. Jester, we're delighted to have you be a part of the American Choral Directors Association and our series, ACDA on Location.
Thank you. Amen.
You have contributed so much to the life and the history of choral music in our country. And we have so much to be thankful for because of you and what you have contributed to us. Tell us some about your early introduction to choral music, your early life and experience with it in Pennsylvania.
Well, so far as I can remember, I didn't have a real choral life. I wasn't brought up in a family of singers, as so many of my friends, black and white, have been. My father died when I was only a little less than a year old, and my mother was a domestic, and she had to work. That's all we had to earn living. Her mother took care of me as the mother while her daughter, my mother, worked. And all my life until I left school, my mother was the domestic. She was the man of the family, and my grandmother took care of my sister and me. So we had a very, very rough life. And the members of the family helped her. Brothers and sisters helped her along with us as much as they could, but we had a pretty rough time getting along. We moved, I was born in North Carolina, in a little town called Blues Creek. The blacks called it Blues Creek, as if it were B-L-U-E-S, but the correct spelling on the post office, I went back for a family reunion one year, 25 years ago, 30, and it was B-E-L-E-W-S, Blues Creek, but both the whites and the blacks called it Blues Creek, the little town where I was born. It was on, by the way, one of the Hairston plantations. My family name was Hairston. My father was a Hairston, his father, and so forth. And I was born, I understand, on part of what had been during the war, before the Civil War, a Hairston plantation. They had about, I think it's 15 plantations of slaves extending clear out to Mississippi. One of the plantations was as far as Mississippi, and one in Missouri. But this one family had 13 plantations, and at the end of the war they had these 13 plantations and 5,000 slaves. So in those days, the slaves that were captured from Africa and brought over, then their descendants were named after the people who belonged to them. That's the only way you could identify them, because in Africa they had the names of their parents and so forth, but they had African names, you see, and they weren't picked out as individuals when the people who captured them got them. They brought them promiscuously all over here, and when they were sold on the auction blocks, the man who bought them may have bought a half-dozen slaves who spoke a half-dozen different languages and came from the 6 tribes, you see. And it was a rough time. A lot of people don't realize that, and they think that all the blacks came over here speaking the same language. They're black, you had to speak black, but that wasn't true. Just the same as the whites in Europe. They're all white, but they speak different languages. Little countries very close to each other speak different languages. The same thing happened only to a much wider range in Africa, because the blacks were so big and the country was so big. Entire country belonged to them, and little tribes and larger tribes and so forth all spoke different languages, had different ideologies and so forth, different religions. Everything was different, just the same as it was in Europe. And people don't realize. They think because we're all black, we're related. I have to give you a story. It was such a cute story. I've got to tell this one. My wife and I were I was sent over there by the State Department, by the Army. I mean, we were entertaining soldiers after the Second World War. This is 1946, and we were stationed in Antwerp, Belgium, in the USO, and they gave us a weekend off, and we went up to Holland, Amsterdam, Holland, and I was we were in the hotel there. I went down, I think it was Sunday, but anyway, I went down for breakfast before Marge. Marge was dressing, my wife. I went down and had breakfast, and while I was sitting at a counter, I was sitting on a little stool near a counter, a Dutchman came up, and he had 4 little puppies, little young dogs, on a leash. And I looked down in a restaurant in America, you know, you're not allowed to have dogs in an eating place, in a restaurant like this. So I says, you speak English? He said, a little. And I said, what goes on with the dogs? And he said that he was in show business, and then naturally we took a liking to each other. I was in show business. I had charge of the choir in a big show over there. And so he said that the Germans, he had 6 dogs, no, he had 8 dogs trained to do a vaudeville act, you know, until the Germans came in. When the Germans came in and conquered Holland, they didn't want anything that consumed food. So they killed his dog. He had 4 dogs. They killed 4 of these dogs and left their 4 little puppies so that he could train them for his act after the war, you know. So he saw me with the American Army uniform on. It's a little different from the regular Army uniform. We belong to USO. And he said, you American Army? I said, yes, I am in the Army. And he said, what do you do? I said, I'm an entertainer, artist. And he says, I am too. I said, yes, here we are. And he said, I've been to your country. I said, yo, you have, huh? He said, yes, United States. By the way, you know a lady in the United States named Loretta Butler? And I thought, I said, yeah, I know she has a dance school in Los Angeles, doesn't she? He said, yeah, that's the lady. I came upstairs, told Marge. I said, Marge, I guess the white folks are right about us. They think we're all related because we're black. I told her the story of this guy. I've met more white people that same thing. As my name is Jester Hairston. I'm from Pittsburgh. Do you know a man in Pittsburgh? He's your color, named George Francis. I met him 15 years ago. And I've met so many white people with that stupid idea that we were all cousins. Had to be because we were black. And here's a man in Holland telling me, you know a lady in the United States named Loretta Butler. I said, yes. And I knew her. I came home, and when we came home months later, I called her and said, Loretta, I guess maybe the white folks are all right. We must know each other. I met a man in Holland, and he told me that he asked me if I knew you, lady, didn't say California or Los Angeles, just in the United States, named Loretta Butler. She taught at dance school.
We know you've been all over the world, entertaining and singing and conducting, but tell us how you got started in music. What age? Was it when you were still in school?
Oh, no. I was out of school when I got started in actual music. My college life, my first 2 years were in agricultural school at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. And then I transferred in my junior year and went to Tufts University. And there I studied music. A lady I met a lady in Amherst who offered to lend me the money to go to school with, and I studied music those 2 years and graduated, and then I studied with a private teacher. I was paying $5, I think it was $5 a half hour for voice lessons, borrowing the money from this lady. Back as far as 1926, yeah, 27, 28. Yeah, I was borrowing money from her at 5% interest. She charged me interest on the money to go to school. Then when I finished in 29, finished school, I went to New York, and I thought I was a very fine musician, and that was going to take New York by storm, but I didn't, like very few do, take New York by storm.
Did you sing as a child? Did you sing in school or in church?
We sang just children's songs. I liked music as such, social music, you could call that. I liked to be in groups. Then when I grew up in high school, we had barbershop quartets. That was real barbershop days those years. I sang barbershop and had a good ear for music. I had a good ear for sounds. I didn't know the chords as I do now, the names of the chords, but I could sing almost the bass part. Anything that you tried to sing, I could sing. That was good ear. But that's about the height of my music training as a child. In schools in Pennsylvania, they had a very fine system of teaching music. Do-re-mi system, the movable do system. By the time I was in 4th grade, I could read almost anything because they taught it to us. And then a man came to one school and stayed all day and gave the teachers music to teach us. And I learned by that. By the time I was in 4th grade, I knew all the sharps and flats and everything and could read pretty well.
Did you sing in church?
Yes. I began in church listening to the little hymns of children's hymns and so forth. My grandmother was a very devout Christian. She was Baptist, and she took me to the Baptist church in Sunday school on Sunday. And my mother, her daughter, was Methodist. She took my sister to the Methodist church with her. So we had a dose of Baptist and Methodist every day, every Sunday. Baptist, Methodist. It was wonderful. I grew up in the church, and I grew to like it to such an extent that on Sunday I'm uncomfortable unless I go to some church and so forth. This last Sunday, on Saturday, I decided that I would had Sunday off, and I was going to get 8 hours sleep, come hell or high water, and I found myself waking up at 6:30. And by 8:30, I was down at our church, Methodist church, listening to the minister. And for some reason or other, I'm a part of the church, and I love the church. It doesn't make too much difference what denomination it is. I just happen to go to a Methodist church. I grew up as a Baptist, but I love church, and I love the singing. And if the minister is very, very good, I get something out of all services. But my relationship with people all around the world is of such that I believe God is universal. I don't care what black man or what white man or Chinaman. My idea of God is that he is no color at all. He is a spirit, the Holy Ghost, that will look after anybody who chooses to praise him and worship him and keep his commandments. But insofar as saying that God has to be Irish or German or white or black or brown, I do not believe that. I believe he is colorless, and I can see him as no color at all, but as a devout spirit that's helping me.
After you left Pennsylvania and school there, you went to Massachusetts to college, but you didn't go to study music, I understand.
No, I went to study agriculture. I wanted to be a landscape architect because my mother was so poor, and she was earning such a little salary as a domestic working for white people that I wanted to take something that would help me so I could help her. And one of the teachers there at Massachusetts University told me that at that time, 1920, when I graduated from high school, that he would, that I could, if I took landscape architecture, to become a landscape designer of estates for rich people, you know, around. He said, you could probably write your own ticket. There would be he said, very few colored, we were colored in those days, black people, and now we're black. But in those days we were colored. He said, very few colored people would have a job like that as a designer and a degree in it, and you could choose your own salary and so forth. That was for me, helping my dear mother who lost her husband, my father, when I was a little less than a year old. My sister was only 3 days old, so I took that. But later on, I met a lady who helped me in music, and she decided that I had talent, white lady, and she went on to decide that she would help me if I left University of Massachusetts and went on to Boston and studied music, and that's what I did, and ended up in the theater in New York.
After you left Tufts University and you went to New York, is this your first involvement with choral conducting and choral work?
Yes, yes, yes. I met a man there in New York in 1931, yes, 31, last was 31, first 32, Hall Johnson, Halljohnson, and he was a choral conductor up in Harlem, the black district in New York City. And he was a very fine, now he was a trained musician. He graduated from the music conservatory in Philadelphia, and then he had studied with private teachers and played viola in orchestras. He played in the black orchestras that played in shows on Broadway. He was in Shuffle Along, one of the biggest Broadway shows ever on Broadway, black shows. But in the midst of his success as an instrumentalist and a man in show business, his folks were slaves. His ancestors, his grandparents were slaves. I think his parents were slaves. Yes, my grandparents were slaves, and he was 13 years older than I. So his parents were slaves, ex-slaves, and he decided that he loved the slave music that they created, and he heard when he was a child, to the extent that he wanted to stop teaching and stop playing in the professional orchestra, just earning money to keep alive. He wanted to leave a heritage here of arrangements of spirituals, and so he quit the theater and decided to develop a choir in 1925, and I joined his choir in 1931, 32, and later on I became assistant conductor of his choir, and that was quite a push for me, and that was my education in spirituals began with him. Although my folks sang the songs, old songs of the slaves at church and so forth, I didn't get the dose of the background of our music that I should have had until I met Hall Johnson, and his choir was singing all the old spirituals, so forth. By that time, I stayed in Massachusetts about 6, 8 years, and when I first went there, I met on the first day in Massachusetts in 1923, I think it was, in Boston. When I was standing on the corner, and a garbage wagon came up to the sidewalk near, and they were preparing to put the garbage into the wagon. And one man said to the driver, what time do you think we'll get off this afternoon? And this driver, a great big black man sitting up there at the wheel, you know, had horses, no trucks, horses. He says, I think 2:30. And I said, 2:30? Looking like first one thing, another here. They were talking about 2:30. I said, I got to learn some of this. So I devoted, religiously, I devoted my attention to speaking New England dialect, accents. And I put it on, and I had it when I left New York. I left Massachusetts after years there and went into New York. And when I got into this choir with Hall Johnson, and he listened to me sing, he auditioned me in, and I was singing in the choir baritone. And one time I asked him if I could study with him. I was interested in becoming his assistant, or at least a choral conductor of these songs. And he said, "No, I can't. I can't be bothered with you." He says, "I'm fixing to ask you to lead the choir." I said, "What?" And he said, "Why, sure." He said, "You." I said, "What's the matter? I think I'm one of the best musicians you have in the choir." He said, "Maybe you are, and that's one of the reasons I'm thinking about getting rid of you. Or you think so, I don't think so." And I said, "What's wrong? What am I doing?" And he said, "Well, one reason, you don't have the same attitude toward these folk songs that we're singing. These are songs of our ancestors, and they are something beautiful. These songs will be here being sung by people when both you and I are dead and gone. They'll be singing these songs. They're great. They're American songs, and you don't think so much of them. We're singing can't and ain't, and you singing chant and can't in the baritone section, and they don't mix in the Negro spiritual. And when you get off your high horse and want to learn something about your ancestry, why, maybe I'll have something to do with you."
Tell us about the ancestry and the early black music, from the slave days.
It led into that. This bawling out that I got from him led me to begin to think about what happened now, what was wrong, what am I doing? And then I came to the conclusion that he was right, because I really looked down on these songs. Coming with this Boston education that I had, I looked down on the Negro spirituals, the black colored spirituals they were in those days. I looked down on these things as being not worthy of Boston and of the degree I had from Tufts University, and so forth. I thought more of my degree than I did of this dialect that they were singing. They couldn't even speak English. And so when he gave me that dressing down, I said, "Well, now look here, you got to look at yourself, boy. You know you came from that background, so what are you going to do?" And then I began to take stock and sing the songs. And finally I got interested enough to go to the libraries and begin to read about some of the songs. And there was a library of American Negro folk music by Mr. what was his name? Schomburg. A black man had a library on 135th Street right there in Harlem, and I lived not far from there. And I used to go up there, and he had all kinds of rare books on black history from Africa, from all over the world where blacks had done something, And I began to read these books, and especially the old books of songs of my ancestors as slaves and things, and I began to get interested in them, and the dialect too, because he had bawled me out about singing I'm singing New England dialects of these black songs, and they didn't fit. And then gradually I began to get some sense, and these songs grew on me until finally I decided to devote my life to them as he was devoting his life. So when I came to California, I was his assistant conductor in 35. And from then on, after I left him, he went back, he and Hall the Choir went back to Los Angeles, and I began to go for myself in the picture business here and make arrangements for choirs.
Tell us about the early slave music, the music of the slaves, the work songs, the spirituals.
I learned that from my grandmother. I learned about those songs when I was a little child. Didn't know what they were talking about half the time. My grandmother was a slave, and all of her, she was very popular with the old people her age. When we came to this little town, Homestead, Pennsylvania, and she accumulated a lot of friends. all of them were ex-slaves, and they used to come to our house in balmy evenings like this and sit outside in the yard and tell their experiences on their plantations as slaves. And sometimes they'd sing songs. They all didn't have good voices, but they knew how. They listened to them, you know, and they sang these songs and told some of the most god-awful stories. Or invariably, they ended up with ghost stories. Every plantation had a ghost, you know, and so forth. But they sang these spirituals, and I got interested in them, the rhythms and so forth. That, I think, was by osmosis, because it was too small to know anything about music. But the rhythms got into me to such an extent that it was easy for me to fall in with the songs when they began to sing songs and so forth. And they used to tell about some of the songs. They told about, for instance, the early slaves coming over here. These are the beginning of the Negro spirituals. When they came over here, was captured, pell-mell, and brought over here, the very first thing that the white people had to do was civilize these black, what they call civilize them. And they had to try to get them, make them so that they would be docile and do what you have to break them, just like you do a wild horse. Because these people were men, they were men in their hometown, in their jungles, we call jungles, but it was theirs, and that was the best they had, and they fought to the death to protect it. So now when they were conquered to this extent and brought over to this country, some of them committed suicide, especially the Igbo tribe from Nigeria. They were very famous for committing suicide. But the others, it took them a long time to become docile enough to want to do what the master told them to do. They were belligerent, and some set the plantation afire and so forth. Many of them were killed in the act and so forth. But gradually, as time went along, the white people experimented with them. Said, what do we do to keep these blacks docile? Then somebody said, well, why not let's make Christians out of them, give them Christianity. And Christianity was given to us not so much to get us in touch with the divine presence of Jesus, but it was to make us docile, because Christianity teaches brotherhood. And we said, now, we are your older brothers. And if you do what we say, our God is different from your God. He's a different spirit. He's more benevolent. You're benevolent. Your gods are fetishes, and they're no good. And you must not serve them. You cannot. We'll punish you. You must serve our God. And then we were told about Jesus Christ, how he would do so forth. But we were never told that Jesus Christ had no color. He was white, so he had to be white. So we began, after we found out that we couldn't worship our God, we'd be punished if we did, then we began to think about this God. And we had gods in our own country, and gods that we couldn't see, and so forth. So we had a basic study of God. We knew what they were talking about, because we had gods too, like that. And then we tried to he said, we can't beat them, because they got us over here. We have no ammunition to fight back, and so forth. So if we can't beat them, we'll join them. And so we joined them, joined the masters in his religious thinking. Then, being a rhythmic and a very artistic people, they were all artists, because God gave them that the inheritance in music. They were rhythm, he gave them rhythm, and then I found only in recent years, with more studying of these people, that all their languages were created for rhythmic interpretation. All their words have rhythm, are rhythmic words, and that's the reason that in many of their songs, they couldn't make it fit to the English language. With their rhythms, the English language was too staid, you know, and so instead of making their language subside to and fit the English word, they had rhythm. The rhythm was so strong that they shaved the English word to fit their rhythms, and that's what makes dialect. There you have dialect. if a rhythm was in, for instance, I'll give you just a quick demonstration. One of their simple songs, very early songs, called His Name So Sweet. This is a two. I just come from the fountain. I'm just from the fountain, Lord. I just come from the fountain. His name so sweet. Now that's in a two. Now he wants to say the verse, that's the chorus. He says, His name so sweet. Now he wants to say, backslider, do you love Jesus? Backslider, do you love Jesus? It's coming in all right now. This two. Now that two to him is constant. And regardless of what, the English language has to be fitted to that. Backslider, do you love Jesus? Yes, yes, I do love my Jesus. Now you got a downbeat. You can't say backslider on a downbeat. Nowhere in the world you can say, backslider, you're late, or you're backslider, you mess up your whole thing. So he says it easy. He says, His name so sweet. Up. Backslider, do you love Jesus? Yes, yes, I do love my Jesus. Slider, do you, hadn't got time to say back. It's slider, do you love Jesus? Cuts the word in half and goes right on. If white folks don't know, that's their hard luck. We know what we're talking about. So we write the songs for ourselves anyhow. So that's the way it was with every song they created. The rhythm, the white word had to fit their rhythm. And there you get dialect.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Tell us your early involvement with the Negro spiritual and
Well, I began to become interested in them first with the Hall Johnson Choir, because he had such a fine rapport with the people in explaining these songs and giving stories of his grandparents, you know, and so forth. And that's what made me become more and more interested in trying to find out more about them. And gradually, and then one time, then after we became closer related to each other, Mr. Johnson and I, he says, hey, I told him I wanted to study with him. He said, I'll tell you what you do. You've been long enough in New York long enough to form some friends. Why don't you get a little choir of friends and bring them up here to my house? And these were in 1931, 32, and 33. Depression was on, nobody was working, so we had nothing but time. He said, bring your friends up and teach them sightseeing and harmony, what harmony you know, and that'll keep you up to date in it, and bring them too. And then I'll look at you from another room and maybe give you some pointers in rehearsing. And that's what I did for about 2 years. Every day we go there, but everybody had time, and we go there and sometimes take some food there, a few dimes and things, and they cook food, and that's where we lived, like the early settlers of whites. And we ate, and I would try to, because I didn't know conducting, I didn't take conducting at college, but that was my beginning, and he'd correct me and so forth. So I got a very good background and beginning from listening to him and conducting the way he did. Then after a while we got a job, a sextet. He put me at the head of a sextet that sang on NBC. They want Andre Castellanos. This was a big program. We were fixing to go away on a tour, and just about 4 days before we left town, NBC called up and said that they wanted to use the Hall Johnson Choir. He said, well, we're going on a tour, but I have a young man as my assistant who has a choir of 20 young people who are very good, and they said, send him down, we'll use your name. And they sent me downtown, and that was my beginning of real conducting by myself and getting a troupe. We went 13 weeks on the Maxwell House Coffee Show, NBC, with Andre Castellanos. You remember him? Oh, yeah. Well, he was the orchestra conductor of this show, of the big orchestra, and we had these. I had to make an arrangement each week of a spiritual for this young choir, and we were on there 13 weeks, and that was a lot of education I got. And I found out I didn't know a thing, so I went to Juilliard School of Music, took theory for 2 more years of theory, trying to find out what music was all about. But that was my beginning, and from then on I just went on.
Tell us about the lining out of a tune.
Oh, yes, that goes back to the early days. I'm glad you asked me about that, because so much revolves around that idea. The English, that goes back beyond us, before we came over here. We came over in 1619, but before 1619, imagine early England. The English people, especially the people in the church, the poor people of the church and out in the country, many of them were very, very poor, and the singing became so bad in the English church that the ministers and the bishops were humiliated that the music was so bad because nobody could read. They didn't have public schools like we do here, you see. So the whites didn't have schools, nobody could read, and they couldn't read the hymn books and the songs in the hymn books. So what the ministers, some of them got a bright idea, and they choose a certain people who they knew could read and possibly carry a tune. A woman, a man, another woman, something. And according to the size of your church, you designate people to do this. And so this lady maybe have 3 songs that she taught to the whole church congregation. And she would come, they would have rehearsal before church, meet an hour before church started, and they would have these rehearsals. And they would line the song out, like we line out, "Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound." "Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me." They had to learn that by rote. "I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see." And they had to go over it and over it again because they could not read. But with the repetition, they learned it. And then they would sing. And gradually, somebody else had 3 songs and so forth. But all of them did that. And gradually, the music began to improve. Because by rote they learned these words, and they knew a little thing about rhythm, and sister so-and-so would conduct a song, brother so-and-so conduct his, and so it began to improve. Now that was in the early English church. We were still in Africa. All right, they brought these Africans over here, and some of them were so wild that they would not accept civilization, and they killed their masters or burned up the plantations and so forth. So somebody got the bright idea, why not give them religion? Let's see, and maybe that will help us civilize them. So they were given religion and told about our God, white gods and so forth, and said, now, you cannot sing your songs, your African songs. You have to sing our songs. We'll let you come to church, sit in the balcony, and listen to real civilized Christians serve God, and you can copy after us. So that's what the early ones did. They learned English. They had to learn English so they would know what the minister was saying. But they liked these songs, that the white people, and they liked that system of teaching, because that was what we had been doing for 5,000 years, where the leader would say, and everybody said, he said, and they do that. So, you know, and so song and response, the words in response. And so they began to learn that system. That's what, it was easy for them, lining out a song. Up until after the war, my grandmother and them, all those slaves used to tell those stories. They told the most stupid story, but I like it, about the same thing. This is after the Civil War, and the blacks moved on to their own little towns and so forth. But they had churches, and they copied right after their masters with this same type of lining out songs. So they said this minister, a jackleg preacher. Jackleg preacher is A lot of white people down south, they know it as well as blacks. He is a minister who has no church of his own, and he goes from town to town. Sometimes they call them itinerant ministers or circuit riders. That's what white folks say. We say jackleg preachers. He has no. So the preacher, the main speaker, let this man preach this day, and this Sunday. He introduced him. He says, I want you all to give Brother Jackson your undivided attention. Brother Jackson gets up and says, brothers and sisters, my eyes are dim, I cannot see. I did not bring my specs with me. Sister Haley Jenkins thought he was lining out a song, you know, and that was on her duty. So she said, come and meet it, y'all. Everybody got up there. My eyes are dim, I cannot see. I did not bring my specs with me. And he's trying to stop him. You know, he says, I did not mean it for him. I only meant my eyes were dim. I did not mean. He had to get him out of there some kind of way. He had to stop singing, because as long as he sang it in rhythm or said it in rhythm, they're going to sing, because that's what they've been, and they got that from their white masters.
Is this where Shepherd came from?
Yeah, same type. Only they had gone further. Then they gone to the point where the choir would sing the songs. They line out the song, and then the choir would sing something, and they had someone would sing a descant over that. You know, the leader would lead. This is an old song. Gee whiz! I told you about that song. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's the young generation of blacks never heard anything like that. This type of singing had not been sung in this whole last 2 generations, I'm sure, because it was very old when I came along, and that was a long time ago. But anyway, what they did, the song, they would lead a song. Now here's an old Christmas song. It's still in some books, but not many. It's called Shepherd, Shepherd, and it's a rock. The whole church would rock to it. The melody says, Shepherd, Shepherd, where'd you leave your lambs? Shepherd, Shepherd, and so forth. That would be the rhythm of the song. The whole church is rocking. Shepherd, where did you leave your lambs? While they were singing that, he would put a descant over that, and they would all come in. Now, that's beautiful. There's where your counterpoint began. We sang things like that in Africa, where you had counterpoint over the choir thing. Now, I'm going to take, the choir said, Shepherd, I said, Shepherd, tell me where'd you leave your lamb? Ooh, Shepherd, I said, Shepherd. And he, all kinds of, he'd go anywhere he wanted, and finally ended up on key. There's your counterpoint with your descant on. Same as in the regular Catholic Church. And then they wrote, they created a lot of what we call telegraph songs. They sang a lot of songs about singing to each other about their masters. And sometimes the master liked the song. He heard these blacks out there singing in the fields and down at the quarters, and they went down and listened to them, and they liked these songs. And some of them liked them to such an extent that they took part in the songs. And these are songs to what we call telegraph songs. And I have many of those. I get the easiest one to give you a demonstration quickly as possible is they were talking about Jesus being a benevolent man, and this song is "Get On Board, Little Children." You know that song? Mm-hmm. When I was a youngster, in high school and before, that was the most popular of the Negro spirituals. Oh, get on board, little children. Getting on board going on a train to heaven. You know, there's room. All the white folks knew it and sing it. They were singing, "Oh, get on board." Well, now the blacks created this song to tell. They had something in their mind. They wanted to tell each other about the white people. You know, that there's something wrong there. They're not treating us right and so forth. But they couldn't stand up on a corner down here at Broadway and tell these people about how the whites are treated, especially if there are any white people in the audience. But they created a little song, and then they created a mess of songs. This song, the idea was to sing 2 or 3 verses that were nonsense verses. They acted as to put the master to sleep. When he'd been inoculated with this 2 or 3 little silly verses, then they bring the verse that they've been trying to tell each other about in, and the master was singing with them. He didn't know what they're singing. So now here's 2 or 3 little verses they start. They're singing about getting on board the train. Oh, get on board, little children, get on board. Little children, get on board. Little children, there's room for many or more. First verse, just a stupid verse to get the master inoculated with what they're saying. The fare is cheap and... No. I hear the car wheels running. She's running. I hear the bells of whistling. She's running through the land. I hear them bells and whistles and so and so. Get on, get on. The gospel train is a-coming. I hear it just at hand. I hear them car wheels rumbling and moving through the land. Now get on board. By that time the master says, "Oh, listen to the doctors. Aren't they nice? Listen to them again." He says, here's the verse that they want. See, they want to tell this verse here. The fare is cheap, so we're going to heaven. The fare is cheap and all can go. The rich and poor are there. No second class on board this train. No difference in the fare. Now get on board, little children. No difference when you go to heaven. Blacks and whites, no difference. No second class. Then after they were allowed to ride the trains at all, they had to ride second class, you see. And that's what they were protesting against, second class people in a Christian environment. And they were resenting that. But they know they couldn't stand on the corner and say that I don't want to be in the second class. If I belong to Jesus and his group, I want to be in first class right with you all, Master. They would have been killed or gotten rid of some kind of way. But they put it in songs. And I could sing you dozens of songs that we get. And white people have been singing them all these years. And some of them never knew that they were songs. Telegraph songs.
The dozens of songs you're talking about. Let's go on. After you met Hall Johnson and you moved to Hollywood then, and that started another part of your involvement with choral music.
Yes.
Once you arrived in Hollywood.
That's right. I went to Hollywood and we went there to do the music for the picture Green Pastures. We had done the show on Broadway, and they wanted us to do the music. And so instead of doing the music at Warner Brothers, instead of doing it with a choir, a black choir in Hollywood here, there were a lot of the choirs then, they brought us all the way 3,000 miles here to do the music. And we did that music, and when we got through with that music, we were supposed to go back home. It took us about 6 or 8 weeks to do it. And then we gave a concert. We gave a concert somewhere, some other place, I forget where it was now, but to go home with. And it so happened that the great composer, Russian composer, Dmitri Tiomkin, was in the audience and listened to us sing. And shortly thereafter, well, he came out here to do the music for a picture called Lost Horizons with Ronald Coleman. Fine, fine picture, a beautiful story. And he did the music. And when they asked him about the choir he wanted to choose to do his music, Russian music, he mentioned the Hall Johnson Choir. And Hollywood had a fit. Studios like to die. Who in the world ever heard a nigger singing Russian music, you know? And they can't do it because they didn't want us. Because before then, they didn't have blacks and whites singing together or anything in the studio like that. And he quietly told them, I don't see colors, I hear sounds. I write sounds. They have no color to them. They make you listen. And they couldn't see that, not Hollywood. And so, but anyway, they succumbed, and Dimitri wrote the music. And Mr. Johnson, my boss, was supposed to do the arrangements, and I, as assistant, would help in the rehearsal of the music, you know, times when he was tired and so forth. But he took sick at the beginning of that picture, and lo and behold, I had to write the arrangements and make them, and it was way beyond me because I didn't know anything about that. And then he wrote the piano part. What he did, I found out what they do. They composed it right out the piano part, and you take out of this harmony what you want to write for soprano, alto, tenor, and bass and things, with no key signature. He wrote it like the Russian composers. You just start off, you know, G sharp, so and so, and right, and nothing but sharp. That stationary do, you know, and fixed do, and it was like Chinese to me. But God helped me. I believe in God. And I asked him to please help me. Mr. Man was sick throughout the whole picture. He did 2 or 3 of the early arrangements, and I had to do all the rest of them. And at the end of the picture, they got an Academy Award for music. Dimitri Tiomkin, his arrangements and so forth. It's right there on record. And Dimitri told me then, he said, Jester, if I do another picture here in Hollywood, you will become my assistant conductor and arranger. And I worked for him for 20 years. And that's where I learned music. Not in the conservatory, and not on Broadway, but in the studios with that teacher coming from Russia. Having to do that nasty music, because I didn't play piano, and I didn't have an actual background in music, but God gave it to me.
Dimitri Tiomkin then played a great part in your early life, in your choral music, and your future writing of choral music.
For 20 years. All the harmony was based on what I learned from him with these chords and things of his, because he came from the people, and he was a nice man. One time, my wife was in the choruses that I had doing his music, and he told me one time, he said, Jester, I'd like to come to your house and have dinner. And he lived way out there in a mansion in Hollywood. I told Margie, she almost died. Oh, that girl almost died. Not Dimitri Tiomkin coming over here on the east side with all these blacks. I said, he said he wanted to come over. And I told him that he was welcome to come to my house, but he would have to eat the soul food that we ate if he wanted anything. And he came over there on 45th Street, took off his coat and stretched out on my sofa and rested until March. And we cooked, I don't know whether we had neck bones or what we had, but we had some soul food, what we could afford, and didn't have any of his high-class wines and things. I said, I have some beer, if you could drink that. That's good for me. And he drank that and ate cornbread and real soul food and had a good time and went to sleep sitting on the couch there. Slept a couple hours. He says, this is what I had in Russia. I was used to this. He was a wealthy man here because of the studio's pay, but he came up on that type of food, and I did too. And so we had a ball.
That's great. I know you're a poet. You've written some beautiful poetry. A lot of text for your spirituals. Are they things that you have written?
Oh yeah, some of the songs. A lady brought a song to me 15 years ago, I guess now, and it's one of our best songs. It's a little West Indian song called Gossip, Gossip, and she wrote it, and she gave it to me. She said, Jester, I use this song. She's a very fine nightclub singer. And she says, I use this song in my act, and the people like it very much, but I don't know how to put it down. I'd like you to put it on paper for me. And so I looked at it, had all kinds of possibilities, and I says, I can add a couple more verses here, a little more showy than your verses. And so I'll make a choral arrangement and take half the royalties with you. She said, that's okay. And so I made an arrangement, and that little song has gone around this entire world. It's called Gossip, Gossip, and I get the whole audience to sing the chorus. Gossip, gossip, evil ting, much on. Then I go into to the dialect of the West Indians coming from Africa to the West Indies. Had trouble just like the blacks who came on across here to the States. They had trouble with many of the English words. And as singers, I think it's important that I do some work with them on teaching them how to sing these words. For instance, they couldn't pronounce the TH in the article THE, gave them a lot of trouble. They couldn't say the. No TH sound like that. The, this, that. And so the, this, that became to the, this, and that, you see. And where THING, gossip, gossip, evil ting. They couldn't say thing, so say gossip, gossip, evil ting, much unhappiness it bring. If you can't, now they could say can't because the Englishmen taught them that, and that wasn't difficult. If you can't say something nice, then don't talk at all is my advice. And we sing this little song. Gossip, gossip, evil ting, how much unhappiness it bring. If you can't say something nice, don't talk at all is my advice. And I wrote a lot of stupid verses, and I wrote the last verse says, there is one thing about a gossip, and believe me, this is true. If you tell she about somebody, she tell somebody else about you. Now the chorus, gossip, gossip. And I got a whole lot of verses. That song is just tremendous all over the world. I've sung it in Germany, Yugoslavia, England, everywhere around I sing that song. And all people like it. And in Mexico City, that's a big song of mine. So many of them grow like that. But gossip, gossip, and Poor Man Lazarus, I have one like that. They love that one. Poor Man Lazarus. Of course, Amen. That's my theme song. Amen. And but I try to go into the dialect and teach these young white people, young white. And I love it so much because because I love young people. I like to work with them. And even babies in kindergarten. God has given me something where I can reach these little children. Over here, Simi Valley, when that was open, very wealthy people first moved into there, upper class whites. I went over there, and the teacher says, Jester, we're singing your song, Poor Man Lazarus, but we don't say that word about what is it? I love to shout, I love to sing, I love to praise the King. Is that the song where Poor Man Lazarus? Oh yes, that's the song, Poor Man Lazarus. I sent to, and these were small children, and the teacher was, she's one of these prissy little women. She said, we don't say that bad word about H-E-L-L. And I said, oh, you don't know what you say? She just said, we point down there, and that's all. So I said, okay. She said, so don't mention anything about that, please. And she switched off, and I told these children about the song. And when we came to it, he said, Poor Poor man Lazarus, sick and disabled. I dip your head, finger in the water, coming, cool my tongue, cause I'm tormented in the flame. We came to that second verse. Rich man Dives, he lives so well. I dip a finger in the water, coming, cool my tongue, cause I'm tormented in the flame. And when I said, now when we get to the word, we would just point down there that rhymes with well. So they all said, poor man, rich man Dives, he lives so well. I dip your finger in the water, coming, cool my tongue, cause I'm tormented in the flame. And when he died, he went straight to hell. And I said, oh. I looked at her, I said, I didn't say that. To the teacher. It rhymes so well with what you going to say there. And these little bitty kids, kindergarten, all said hell because it rhymes so well with well. And the teacher, her face was so red. I said, I didn't tell him that, but it rhymes, so why not use it?
You found then that the language of the spiritual communicates to people worldwide.
Languages. The music is a language of people. The music. People will sing with you where they won't even talk to you. But if you sing, that music hits their hearts, and they feel that it does something to them to elevate you and them, and they'll sing it with you. And I haven't had any trouble getting people in every country the government sent me, and Lord knows they sent me for a peace to. Even in Yugoslavia, there's a rough language. I didn't know a thing about the language, but I was able to make friends with those students. I went down and sent me down to Skopje, way down where St. Paul preached down there in Macedonia, somewhere down there. But anyway, I was down there, and these students at the University of Skopje came, and they were so enamored of these spirituals. They come and have extra rehearsals, you know, and then they take me with them. I had an interpreter because I couldn't speak the language, and this interpreter was Yugoslav, but she was working for the American Embassy, and she would tell them, I have to go with them. They didn't want her, and they take me sightseeing. I've gone with as many as 60 of them, and sightseeing, going down the street, looking at a building or something, and they telling me in their language, what about this building? And I'll stand there and say, you don't mean it. Is that so? And they say, yes, yes, and took me to a restaurant, and went in a restaurant with one, almost filled up the whole restaurant, all these students, boys and girls, and the waiter took their order, came to me, and looked at his pencil. I looked at this, the menu was about that long. I put it down and said, he brought me chicken. I'm not chicken. I can communicate with a choir of bulldogs. I don't care who they are. If they listen to me, I'll make them perform. And I do it through these Negro spirituals.
Jester, we thank you for the privilege of being in your home today, for opening your home to the Choral Directors of America, to be able to spend this time with you. You mean so much to each of us, and what you have given to us through your music, your life, your conducting will make all of our lives richer for having known you. And for those who have not known you in person, we hope that this opportunity today to be with you by this means of communication will bring enrichment to their life. We thank you, and we thank God that we had the opportunity to share part of your life with these people today.
God bless all of you. Thank you.